What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the REVIVECAST. So, what I forgot to do in our first episode with Dom was actually introduce myself. So I'm new to this whole podcast game and being the host and everything, so give me a break, guys. A little background on myself. I've been in the coaching industry since 1999. So we're looking at 22 years, give or take, as a dedicated coach. I was dabbling a little bit into it before then, but like when I first got my start, I was actually coaching like primarily athletes, not the physique competitors or anything in that realm. So it was purely like football, basketball, all the sports, everything from high school, collegiate, and the professional level. I did that for roughly 6 years, first 6 years, 6 or 7 years of my career. Then I got into competing myself. I've been competing as a bodybuilder since 1994. So obviously I've been competing a long time. So we're going up on 30 years. So once I started competing, obviously I got noticed for my own physique and like being successful because I won my first competition, which got me hooked. But then people were starting asking me to coach them in that perspective. So I kind of shifted focus from doing purely athletes, which I did love, and performance-based stuff, to more of the physique-based realm in the industry. Did that for a good while, and then I kind of evolved in a sense. So what was happening was I was getting cases or clients where like we were cutting their calories, giving them a lot more output with cardio, and they just weren't making any progress. They were kind of stalling out, so to speak. Body fat wasn't dropping, weight wasn't dropping, nothing was happening. And no matter how hard I pushed them, they wouldn't seem to make any changes. That's kind of like mind-boggling because, like, especially back then, we're talking, 10 years ago, give or take. It was just purely the whole calories in versus calories out. You eat less calories, do more work, you lose body fat, you get in shape for stage, so to speak. Obviously, there's some nuances in there, but I kept hitting these walls more with females than anybody. And I was just like, it frustrated me as a coach. So I started digging deeper, and I started getting into more of the hormones, stress, all these kind of different environments within the system and more physiology based, and try to start correlating things. And then I started going to mentors that I've had in the past and people that are, specialists in those field to educate myself more. And a lot of like light bulbs started going off in my head, and things started making sense of why these individuals weren't progressing the way that I thought they should be. Right. So, way back when, I was one of those coaches that, and I think we all been there to where we just fed the client less, high protein, tons of cardio, when you'd be successful with some clients, but not all of them. But I would get frustrated with the ones that wouldn't get results because I'm there to serve my client and get the best out of them. And it's frustrating as a coach not being able to do that. And then I started seeing a lot of health issues starting to arise. They were getting swollen and puffy, digestive issues, and just things got worse and worse and worse. And so once I kind of educated myself and I kind of dove deep into that end, I evolved into kind of what I am today. And kind of like we call ourselves a hybrid coach, to where we're focused on the functional health perspective, looking at stress hormones, looking at sex hormones, thyroid, insulin, just lifestyle management, everything on top of obviously your macros and your training, recovery aspects of everything else. So I've kind of had my kind of evolution through the years in what I've been doing in this, and it's kind of become full circle at this point. So I've had experience with pretty much every demographic now. There isn't any demographic I have not coached at this point. So, I still coach competitors. I coach lifestyle. There's nothing that we don't touch at this point. And I think it sets us apart, or sets me apart and my company and coaches from a lot of other teams, to where we kind of are all encompassing now, especially with being in Revive and having, the wellness clinic and hormone replacement if we need it, and all those good things with it. So I would say long story short, but that was kind of a long story. That's my background. And then also, obviously, I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I was turned IFBB pro in 2017 in classic physique. And no, I'm not competing this year, but I've evolved a lot as a coach, and I'm continuing to evolve and continue to educate myself. I still have mentors. I still am trying to learn better ways to do things, and just improve today's industry. I want it to go back to the health and fitness industry, not just fitness, because we're missing that health aspect of it. And that's a key component, especially what we're seeing in today's society. All right. So in today's episode, I have decided to bring on my partner in the business and also my partner in life, my wife, Nicole. She's been a coach. Like, I brought her on as coaching. How long ago was that?
Shortly after we got married. So 2013.
Yeah. So
online.
Yeah. So I brought her on to teams. So she'd done personal training and stuff prior to that, one-on-one. Then I took her on as a client, and when we first started dating, and did all that stuff. She'd been there and done all that stuff that we just talked about. And she's obviously played a major role in our success as a company, and we're continuing to evolve. But I specifically brought her on today. I mean, she's intelligent in all aspects, but for the topic we're going to discuss today, and that's going to be adrenal dysfunction. Now, people will throw names around: adrenal fatigue, dysfunction. I don't get caught up in the whole what's it called, what's it not called. Like, people will get in the medical industry, there's just adrenal insufficiency, that it's not called anything else. And then people will be upset because I call it adrenal fatigue, and that doesn't exist. Metabolic damage, metabolic adaptation, the terminology is irrelevant to me. I'm looking at what's going on with the individual, the systems, the tests that we look at and everything else. But my wife has experienced this, and she's currently going through it. So I thought it'd be awesome to bring her on, kind of get her perspective and insight to everything she's went through and the causes, because I also wanted to show you guys that you can do a lot of things right, and these things can still happen to you, right? Like Nicole does the nutrition, the training, recovery, meditation, all that stuff, and it still happened to her. So I'm going to let her kind of give her a brief introduction here and kind of tell us a little bit about her, and then we'll move into the topic.
Yeah, so as Alan said, I came on right after we got married, and I have a background in personal training. I have a degree in exercise science, and our coaching has just evolved over the years. It just keeps getting better and better the more that we learn. I think an important aspect is that we're always willing to say, like, we did X, Y, and Z wrong, and things change, and you learn and you grow, and that's what any good coach does. So we definitely have a passion for helping people, and we love diving deeper. As we grow, we attract more cases that are similar to mine or some of the same symptoms and things like that, but we just have different
Think of the right word. Trust
yes,
me, I do that all the
know.
time.
I'm like, oh.
You get paused. That's okay.
Yeah, so we have different ways of looking at, like Alan said, even some doctors don't identify adrenal. They identify adrenal insufficiency, but not necessarily dysfunction.
Yeah, like they won't look at, like, the medical term is adrenal insufficiency. So that's where the research is at, and that's what they're looking at. But they look at it in one scope. Like, with the research and everything out there, like, number one, most of the research is done with blood serum tests, like blood tests. So the problem with the blood test, it's at one point in the day. Our cortisol rhythm, circadian rhythm, it's very dynamic. It's not like this one point in time, and that's how you can assess everything or what's going on throughout the entirety of the day, right? We have to look at all points and what's going on, obviously base it off of symptoms as well. And like with Nicole, like, we didn't think this, it's almost like you have that mindset of you think it's going to happen to you because you do everything right. Like you're doing all the stuff you're supposed to from a recovery standpoint. You're eating well, you're training, you are recovering well. But I'm going to let her go through kind of what kind of set this off and like the progression of it, because it just happened last year. So like when, we obviously know now, but kind of tell people kind of what you went through and what kind of caused this issue?
So I was experiencing a lot of fatigue. I was experiencing brain fog during the workday, things like that were slowing me down. And I had planned on taking the Dutch test, but we were in the process of moving, things like that. So I kept putting it off. Finally, in December is when I took the Dutch test. But to backtrack, last year, 2020 May, I had explant surgery. So I got my breast implants taken out. I had a muscle repair with that. It was a lot more demanding than I expected. I didn't know what to expect because I had a really good experience putting them in and thought it was a piece of cake. But 12 years later, things are a little bit different. You don't know how long recovery is going to be, but I definitely followed the directions in the sense of no training for 8 weeks, nothing strenuous. I did what they asked, but I could tell that it was very draining, very taxing. I wasn't recovering, again, not knowing what to expect, but that part of you that's feeling like, man, this is taking a lot out of me. And then, so that's May, and the timeline, June, we had traveled. We had decided that we were potentially going to move. We decided we were going to move, and that set the whole motion of finding a new home, just the process, getting everything in order, packing, financials, all of that. It was a lot of stress. So I had this physical stressor in May, and then from June to September, I had psychological stress in the sense of my body is changing. Am I going to be okay with this? Did I make the right decision? And then we go into this move where I have this emotional stress of, again, is this the right decision for us? I'm leaving friends and family, which was very difficult on me. And so I'm compounding all these stressors, all while our business is growing. So I'm trying to keep up with my current workload while doing all these other things that have to get done. Also, while going back to training and, getting my body back in shape and things like that. And so it just was these compounded effects of stress. So there's different types of stress. You have emotional, psychological, physical. So surgery is huge when it comes to stress on the body. Clearly a move is a lot as well. And so by the time we actually got here in September, I was just exhausted. I remember telling Alan, and I'm meeting these new people, and I'm just kind of, for lack of better words, kind of flatlined. Like, you just know that you're not 100% yourself. You're really tired, and you're thinking it's going to get better. Like, you just had a lot going on. It's going to get better. And then December, when I get the Dutch test, and it's one of those things. Sometimes you need that quantitative in front of your face.
You need a visual.
Says, guess what? Your cortisol is flatlined. Like, you're not even hardly producing any cortisol. And so that was a wake-up call for us.
Yeah, so like with the testing, and that's why I like with most of our clients, we do testing, because people will have symptoms and stuff, or even like we'll say like you're stressed out, like we get obviously feedback from them and like questionnaires or whatever, and we're assessing them and we can see that. But like a lot of times, if you can visually show a client data from test, then it's like proof, right? It's like, look, you may not believe what I'm saying, but it's right here in front of your face. Like, look, this is the test. It's showing it flat out. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. So sometimes it takes that to turn the light bulb on the client's head to be able to like, wow, like all this stuff that I went through, like with Nicole and stuff went through, like we just thought she was just tired from everything, just tired, like general fatigue from the move and the surgery and all that stuff, like just being tired in general. But in reality, it was the adrenal issue, right? Because the rest of her blood panels were good. Like her sex hormones, and this is rare, because typically when you have a cortisol issue like this, you're typically going to see sex hormones, thyroid stuff that's going to be downregulated. Now, the one of the main reasons that Nicole's didn't is because she genetically has very, very high cholesterol. And I'm talking very high. So obviously we know cholesterol is our precursor hormone, right? So where you're getting all your sex hormones from your testosterone, which comes then your estrogen and progesterone. So that high cholesterol was actually protecting her sex hormones. So like, see, this is why it's all individual. Like everybody's not the same. Like seeing that is like, oh wow, like that's really protecting her. Now, that's not to say we want to keep her cholesterol high, because that still has, cons to it. But that's why it didn't drop, because some people may see a test, well, why didn't hers drop? Well, and that's why. So what we're going to do too, guys, is on the YouTube channel, we're going to have her Dutch test put up. You're going to see it on the screen here. So you can kind of get an idea of everything. And then we're actually going to go through causes and, some more symptoms and some tools to improve this. But like, if you look at her Dutch test, we're showing the summary page of the Dutch. Okay. So we see obviously all the sex hormones at the top. We're going to see her estradiol, which is her E2, her progesterone, and then her testosterone. So you see estradiol's good, progesterone's good, like it's scaled over. Testosterone's a little low, nothing crazy. So we're all good there. But when we go to the bottom here, where it's showing her daily free cortisol pattern, the top line's the high range limit, which is the black line. The bottom line is the low range limit, which you'll see on any adrenal test that you get done via Dutch, which is a urine test, or you can test it via saliva and a spit test. It's going to have the same graph on it. And then what you'll show is the patient values and where it's in relation to the high and the low range. Okay, so with normal cortisol production, we want that nice rise in the morning, peaking around 8 to 9. That's obviously not exact for everybody. And then it should taper off somewhat during the day and into the night. You go back to sleep, circadian rhythm resets, and it repeats. So you can see hers on here, and it literally is just almost just perfectly in line with the low range limit. So she's hardly, if any, producing any cortisol at this point, right? So this is what we kind of call stage 4 adrenal exhaustion. So this is this is a severe case, and we'll go through a little bit of what some other scenarios you could see. But like this is like boom, like it just opened our eyes up. Like wow, this is why you're having all the symptoms you're having, and what you're going through. I mean, you can see even her to the left of the graph is her 24-hour cortisol, which is her free cortisol, and then metabolized cortisol. So we need to know both of these, because 24-hour, like the free cortisol, it's only around 5-ish% of total production. And then we have the metabolized cortisol, and they're both just tanked. Okay. So just everything's just completely off here. So it kind of gives you a better visual of what we're seeing with her test. Now, as far as, she describes some of her symptoms, right? Like typical symptoms are going to be, like she said, brain fog. It can be just the lethargic feeling, meaning like, you're getting up in the morning and you just don't feel like you're rested, and you're just like dragging all the day, throughout the day. You can even have at some point get depression. There can be like prolonged soreness from the gym, like you're just not recovering. The joints are starting to hurt. You can start getting dysglycemic, meaning unstable blood sugars. You could go have hypoglycemia can occur. I mean, there's a bunch of different symptoms that can occur with this. Go ahead.
So blood pressure was another one. So going from like a sitting to standing position, I could feel a little bit lightheaded, things like that. There were some unusual things that are typical when you have adrenal dysfunction, as far as, you might have insomnia too, things like that. Whereas I'm a good sleeper. I didn't really have the glycemic dysfunction, but that is definitely very common.
Yeah, so
electrolytes can be off too, electrolyte balance.
I mean, there's a lot of symptoms, and this is why we want to give you a few other scenarios. Like, so there's like stages of how this could occur. So we look like there's typically when someone's stressed, it's like an over-under production situation with cortisol, right? So you can, at some point, what will happen is initially your cortisol is going to raise. It's just going to be high, right? So you're overproducing. And then it gets to a point to where that morning cortisol will start dropping down. It'll get low. And then we get basically what we call flipped circadian rhythm, or flipped cortisol rhythm, to where it's low in the morning and high in the evening. And that's when you kind of get that kind of a second wind effect, or that like almost like night owls, to where they feel like they're very, very productive in the evening or late night, like they just stay up later because they feel like they're more productive. Typically, these people have been stressing for a long time, a high demanding job or whatever.
That's more common of what we see.
And it flips it. So low in the morning, high in the evening. But again, it can only do that, sustain that for so long. Then at some point, it's just going to be low. Like it's just going to drop. And when we're talking about these dysfunction, guys, this stuff it takes 30, 60, 90 days for this to occur. It's not just going to happen after a week or two, like just overdoing stuff like this. For these things to occur, it's chronic situations. Okay. So don't think just because after a week and you're really run down and tired, you're just fatigued. I mean, that's not adrenal fatigue. So I don't want you thinking that. Okay. So we look at some other causes here. So those are the typical scenarios we see. And this is why we do testing. A calorie deficit for too long will do it. So not in general, but again, chronic periods of too long of underfeeding, because obviously depletion of nutrients and the stress hormones that will elevate when you're in a caloric deficit, because obviously in a deficit is just a stressful environment, and you do that for prolonged periods of time, it's going to start adding up. Trauma. So like Nicole, she had surgery. That stuff that lasts, like you don't just have surgery and then you're better the next day, right? That stuff is prolonged, the healing process. Overtraining, under recovering. I mean, for the love of God, people, fitness is the only industry to where they treat themselves like they're professional athletes, right? They hardcore, high performance all the time, but they don't treat themselves like professional athletes, meaning they don't have off seasons. They don't take down times to recover. They don't take like proper deload periods. Like it's just this go all the time industry. That's what's promoted all the time, and people are running themselves in the ground. I see it all the time. People can argue with me all they want that the overtraining doesn't exist. Well, I completely disagree, because we see testing all the time. I see symptoms. We get patients, clients all the time that are going through these scenarios. So it absolutely can happen. And that's why we're really big on when we periodize our training programming for clients, females especially, because they have usually a lower threshold to where we have to adjust these things. So that's why I'm really big into periodizing training. I trained athletes for a long period of time. I saw what I had to do to keep their performance levels at their peak. I had to feed them. I had to give them downtime, right? You got to treat everybody's physiology the same. Okay. You can't just because you're not a professional athlete doesn't mean you shouldn't treat your body in the same sense. If you're going to push your body to the next level, you have to have periods to where you're also pulling back, you're resting more, you're recovering more, you're feeding your body in a surplus for a majority of the year and not in a deficit for a majority of the year, which most people do. Other things is obviously nutrient deficiencies. People are going low carb and low fat, which your fats and your carbs are feeding and supporting your adrenals. Another one is staying up too late. Trust me, I've been guilty of this. You get caught up on Netflix or show that's like, oh man, I can watch the next one, and you just like boom, 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 you keep going and going, and before you know it, it's 2 a.m. and shit, I got to get up at 7 a.m. and start my day over. And if you think you can repeat that process over and over, you're sadly mistaken, because it will catch up with you, right? And then one of the last ones is stems and coffee. Now, this is a decaf, so don't rip me here, but yes, I love my coffee. People are just pushing that too much, because what will tend to happen is we relate caffeine with, giving us that increased cognitive function and kind of pep in our step. But we're pushing that button too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon for us to see clients that are taking upwards of 500 to 800 milligrams of caffeine in a day.
Yeah. I mean, I literally have had clients that drink a pot of coffee in the day. And that's obviously an extreme situation.
And as coaches, this is something you do have to ask your clients.
Yeah, you can't just assume that it's all good. Like, you need to track and ask them, like, what's your caffeine intake and stuff, and what's going on with that. So make sure that you are asking the right questions for your clients or for yourself. But the thing with like the stimulants in the coffee, so when you're taking that in, you're artificially kind of pushing cortisol release. Okay, like you're just pushing that button all the time. So remember, when you push cortisol release, when cortisol raises, you're liberating your amino acids, fatty acids, glucose into the bloodstream, right, for activity, so to speak. But if you're just doing that all the day to kind of stay awake, stay alert, do your job, that's not the scenario we want that happening in. But at the same time, when you're also always pushing that button, you are basically programming the adrenals to secrete less over time, because it's, hey, like you're inducing it artificially, so it's not going to secrete it. So you keep pushing your natural production down, and then because you're already artificially producing it. So guess what happens when you don't have your caffeine? You feel like shit. You have no energy, you're lethargic. So guess what you do? You drink more of it. And then you create this horrible lifestyle habit that's just compounding the issue, right? So you got to make sure that you're watching these things because all these can cause it. So obviously, like with Nicole, she's on a regimen now. She's in her situation. I mean, you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks. I mean, it could be a little longer, it could be a little less. Everybody's different. So we want to look like, so, you know, it's great that you're telling us all the symptoms and causes. Like, I'm sure you want to know some steps that you can take to help, you know, heal the body, correct these issues. And, you know, if you're starting to feel some of these symptoms, get ahead of it. Don't wait till you're in that, you know, dead state of like exhaustion and you're not producing any cortisol. Maybe you just have something simple as a flip circadian rhythm. Maybe it's something as simple as, you know, you're lethargic in the morning and then you're good a little bit and then you have a midday crash. You know, that's symptoms of like something's going on, guys. If that's happening for like about a month, and you can put strategies in place to help correct these issues. So we're going to give you some simple tools to help you with these scenarios. Okay. So one of the first things that you can do, and we talked about the overtraining aspect, is pull back on your training. As much as we love training, hitting the weights, or even hit cardio, or whatever it may be, that is a stress on our body. It's having the same physiological response that we're trying to prevent. You're inducing cortisol, because obviously when you train, you increase cortisol production. That's good in a healthy scenario, in a healthy system, but we're not healthy. So we got to pull way back on the training, and that's a battle we have with clients sometimes because they're training 5-6 days a week, and then we tell them, oh, you only can train 2 days a week and not take anything to failure. Of course, that's like really eye-opening to them.
Right, because stress is stress, and a lot of times they tell us that this is my stress relief. Going to work out is my stress reliever. And we get that, and it's not that we disagree, but at the same time, going back to the different forms of stress, training is physical stress. Your body doesn't know any different. So a common thing that I get, because this is something that I had to do, I definitely went back to 2 days of training. And that mental aspect, you know, when I made an Instagram post, I got the comment, how hard was it to take away those feelings of your body's going to go to crap, basically, because you're only training twice a week. And honestly, I think a big thing is you have to switch that mindset of, I need to heal, first and foremost.
You have to fully surrender to the process. Because if you don't, you trust me, you're going to just keep setting yourself back. So like Nicole, and it's not that you're never going to have little setbacks. We all make mistakes, right? And Nicole has went through this too, because like with her, like in these situations, you'll start having days where you do feel better. But the problem is when you start feeling better, people will want to do more and push more. And then you're just setting yourself back, you know, another week.
Which is what gets you in that scenario in the first place, you know, with everything that we had going on. You just power through. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. And a lot of people do that nowadays because shit has to get done. So you just find it and you do it. But at the same time, it's important to recognize, like, it's okay to have different seasons. It's okay that you do need to pull back. And to be quite honest, from a physical standpoint, like aesthetically, because that's where everybody's mind wants to go, you know, yes, I'm softer, but as far as like muscle mass, I mean, we've talked about this. It's not like you lose muscle in a month.
You'll lose muscle tone or the tightness feeling, obviously, because the partitioning of nutrients and all that stuff that happens, obviously, via training, and just the tonus of the muscle changes because you're not under that environment of the stress of weights. That's not a bad thing. And it's not like you're just going to lose 10 pounds of muscle overnight. But at the same time, guys, in these situations, we're also feeding the body really well because we need nutrients. So nutrition is a huge part of this. You can't just train less and heal. So obviously we're like Nicole's, like the amount of food she's eating, like I should say calories she's eating is actually pretty. I mean, she weighs 100 and what are you, 100? I'm bad with this. 110. Well, I mean, give them relative, but like,
I'm like 108 pounds.
She's like 108 pounds, and her calories are around 2,400 calories, give or take, right? She's feeding her body lots of nutrients to heal. And that's the point, is the healing process. You have to take a step away from the whole, I got to look shredded and beach body ready all the time. That's the problem. That's what gets people into trouble a lot in the first place. Trying to sustain that type of activity to require that look, people usually do it in extreme ways or unhealthy ways. And you got to shift the mindset. There needs to be periods to where you're just kind of just in a maintenance mode. Like, you're not pushing anything. Like, you're not pushing fat loss. You're not pushing tons of muscle gain. Like, just chill out for a little bit. It's even fine to get a little bit away from like the weight training aspect and do other activities you enjoy. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it's goal dependent if someone's like a competitor or whatever. Like, I understand that. But at the same time, even in those scenarios, at even our high level athletes, I program in time off. We put in you're going to take a week off at some point throughout the year, multiple times, to make sure that you're resting, because your body was not built to build tissue and muscle 365 days a year. It's just not the way our physiology is. It's very demanding to build muscle. I know it's a very, I want to say, inefficient for our bodies. Our body likes something that's not taxing to it, and adding more muscle tissue is more metabolically demanding on the body and the amount of nutrients it takes to sustain that. It's easier to sustain more fat than it is muscle tissue. So it's not an easy process. So there needs to be times where you chill out and you're not just pushing that button all the time. We talk about pushing mTOR all the time. And then, we've had this discussion with Vince and pushing autophagy. Like, we need to kind of toggle between that a little bit through the years, right? And aging processes and anti-aging processes. You can't just push those aging processes. I mean, a good scenario is bodybuilders that really push the envelope too hard, too fast. You have 25-year-olds that look like they're 45 years old. It's just the reality. I mean, we see it all the time. And that's just because they're pushing that button so hard, so fast. So a few other tools to improve. Sleep wake time. Like we talked about, staying up too late. It doesn't matter, if you have to initially do this with an alarm. I'd rather you wake up naturally, but get in bed roughly around within an hour or less of the same time every night. Get up within an hour or less of the same time every morning. You need to create that normal rhythm in the body and reset that, because you have a disrupted cortisol rhythm. So you need to make sure that you're doing the steps and strategies to reset this. And it's not going to happen overnight. This is stuff that you have to do consistently over time, guys. If you give up in 2 weeks, you're not going to get any results. Another one is parasympathetic activity. Parasympathetic activity is very important because we're in that sympathetic dominant state of that fight or flight response. So activities, like Nicole's really good at this, is like guided meditation, long walks outside, long hot baths with salts. What else do you like to do?
So the point is to stay in like a low cortisol environment. And also it goes back to that mindset work, to priming yourself for the day, setting an intention, just things that are going to help manage stress. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. So yes, walks in nature, grounding, meditative music. Even if people get so stuck on meditation that it has to be a stereotypical way. There's different forms of meditation. It could literally just be a meditative music. It could be a guided meditation. It could be a sleep story. It could be chanting and singing. I mean, there's different forms of meditation, walking meditation. So don't get so caught up on what it's supposed to be, other than allowing yourself that time to decompress. There's journaling. There's even your cooking practices and things like that can be meditative.
Anything that's relaxing to the system. Like
Correct.
Relaxing the mind, relaxing the body, distracting the mind from all the tasks you have to do throughout the day. Do a brain dump.
I tell my clients, I'm like, literally, if you have children and you have 5 minutes in your car without them and you're sitting in silence, whatever it is, because it's just go, 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 and you have to break that pattern. You have to break that cycle in order to change, because what you've been doing is what got you in the situation that you're in.
Yeah. Obviously, another one, no-brainer, is going to be pull out the stimulants. You can't be jacking the caffeine up. You have to take that out. That's non-negotiable. I mean, if you want to get better, you have to pull out the caffeine, and that's hard for some people. but drink
Right.
hot teas and stuff, obviously, that are non-caffeinated, just things like that to kind of replace what you were having and create that habit of having your teas and the calming teas, chamomile and whatnot. And then one of the last things is adrenal support. This is the whole thing with supplements. You're like, could you heal this without supplements? It's debatable.
It would just take
but we absolutely need to support them and make this process a lot faster, a lot more efficient, helping reset these cortisol patterns, these cortisol rhythms, feeding the body with more nutrients. We have our system that we use with our clients, but you need the supplemental support in there, and you need to support the adrenals. They are taxed. So
this is where the testing is really, really
100%.
important, because not everyone's going to have my scenario where it's just flatlined. Like I said, a lot of times we're going to see this imbalance through the day where it's spiking at certain times depending on their lifestyle. And so that's how you know where to implement the supplementation. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because we try to educate and put things out on social media, and then people, I think that I have that, which they very well might, but at the same time, testing is important to know how to. You can do all the lifestyle factors 100%, regardless of whether it's flatlined or you have spikes during the day or at night. You can implement the lifestyle strategies. You can feed up. Like people, you have to eat carbs.
Yep.
You have to you got to let go of the whole deprivation and low calories and all of that, because that is not going to serve you, and that is most certainly not going to heal the situation at all.
Yep.
So, and I know it sounds like a lot, because you got to back down off training. You have to eat more. Like, it sounds like scary things to some people, and I get that. But you have to do it. You have to let go of all of those preconceived bodybuilding ideas and methodologies. I mean, I've told Alan, I said, never in a million years would I think that I would be adding fruit juices to my smoothies or having a sweet potato and some veggies without a protein source, and
we got to get out of this box that's been developed in this industry, right? Of there's good versus bad. Everything's context dependent on what you're trying to accomplish, where your health is, and all these scenarios, and we deal with all the scenarios. So it's not a black and white situation, guys. You have to treat the individual, their symptoms, their whatever their tests tell you. And the thing with tests too, we can't just treat a piece of paper. We have to take the client into account. We have to treat their symptoms, how they're feeling, and not be like some of the other medical professionals out there who you're in range here, you're good. It's in your head.
This is only going to take 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and this is the protocol. No, it's based on feedback of what's happening and what's improving, what's not improving, and that's where you cater the nutrition, you cater the supplementation. There's
no set timelines with us. Someone to give you a timeline when you're dealing with the health issues, honestly, you need to run, because to me that's quackery, because that's like them being able to predict the future. That's impossible. Number one, you never know what's going to happen in their life from that point on. Something else could happen in their life, whatever the life may throw at you. But it's just it's an assessment, week to week assessment. We're seeing what's going on. We're seeing how you're improving. See if we need to move in a different pathway or add in something else or take something away. It's a moving process. Mm-hmm. It's not like, here, do this for 12 weeks and you're all good. That's not the reality of life.
You can say roughly this is going to take about this amount of time, but it's no guarantees. It's no promises.
All right, guys. So I hope a lot of this, opened some eyes and, turn some light bulbs on in your head about, what can happen to individuals like with Nicole, who does everything right, but there's just certain stressors in life that just build up over time, and you can't escape it sometimes. But, get in there, figure out what the root cause is, treat the root cause, don't just treat a symptom. Create the lifestyle and the strategy to correct these issues. Obviously, you can always reach out to us if you need extra help. We're happy to do that. I would tell Nicole to give a shout out, but she's with me, so we know all the good information there. But you can follow her on her Instagram, which is just at Nicole Cress. Obviously, you can DM her with any questions you may have. You can, obviously shoot us any messages you may have on this topic or on the podcast itself. Also, guys, always, please, subscribe to the channel. Give us a review, give us 5 stars. This will obviously help support us so we can keep giving you guys great information. And then we will talk to you soon.